Well, we were really, really pleased when we found out we were expecting Robert. Of course, we had just barely been married. He was due something like the 3rd or 4th of March, but he came on the 15th of February, and he weighed 6 pounds and a few ounces, but he was so beautiful. It was Valentine's Day, and I had been to the doctor, and he checked me, and he said, "Oh, you're not going to have this baby for a few weeks." And so Ralph and I left the doctor's, and I was feeling kind of down, and we went past Lily's, and my mom and dad, their car was there, and oh, that's all I needed. And so I hurried and ran in, and I needed to see my mother. And so we went in and talked to him, and I sat in Lily's rocking chair, and all of a sudden I said, "How do labor pains start?" Lily and Mama looked at me. Are you starting? And I said, "I don't know, I've got kind of a pain in my back." And I said, "It doesn't stay, it comes and goes." And they said, "Well, tell us when the next one comes." And so we sat there, and we found out that the pains were regular. So we decided it must be labor. And Ralph and I went home, and he had given me a little box of chocolates and a Johnny Mathis record for Valentine. And so we went home, and I laid on the bed, and he sat on a chair beside me, and we ate the chocolates and listened to the record and laughed, and he timed the pains. He got out a paper, and he'd write down each. That was quite unusual. I mean, you know. But anyway, we stayed there we left Lily's about 8. Then we got home, and we were there till about 10, and then we decided, well, maybe we better be going, because they were getting stronger. And so we went to the hospital, and when we got up there, the doctor didn't know how I adjusted to pain. And so they gave me some pain medication, and it knocked me clear out. And so the next thing I knew, I woke up, and it was morning. And I said to the lady in the bed beside me, first I fell down, felt my stomach. "No, baby." And I said to the lady in the bed, "Do you know what kind of a baby I had?" And she said, "Oh, your husband and your doctor tried to tell you all night last night, and you just wouldn't listen." Anyway, a few minutes later, the doctor came in, and the nurse came with him, and they brought Robert in for me to see. So I'd had him at, 2 minutes after 12? And I didn't know what I'd even had. But when I first saw Robert, I would take hold of his little hands, and I thought, this is really part of me. This is what Ralph and I created together, this little body. And to me, when the first time I looked at him, I could see so much of Ralph. And of course, as he got older, their coloring was so different, but the shape of their face, and their nose and their mouths, and their eyes, except Bob's got blue eyes, and Ralph's is blue too. But he was so cute. He was just the most precious baby. But I was trying to be a good mother, and I would feed him 4 ounces of milk, and he was just hungry. And so I'd feed him 8 ounces of milk. And by darn, then he'd vomit it all up. He had this projectile vomiting, and it would go clear across the house. But, I kept doing that, and he kept losing weight. Finally, I went to the doctor and asked him, what am I doing wrong? And he says, just feed him 4 ounces. And then he just needs sucking. And so then give him a pacifier or something. And so we did. And we've got pictures of Ralph holding him. Dick and Gail gave him a little outfit that had little red pants and a white shirt and a red tie. And we'd dress him up in it, and he was so cute. And he was, and his cousin Scott was born just 7 days before Rob. And so Rob got 2 outfits that were just alike. And so we put Scott in one and took a picture. He was just really special. He used to, when we'd come home from church when he was little. Well, when he was born, we lived in an apartment on 19th East and 9th South. It was a basement apartment. The Ballantines had it in their basement. And one day I went out to hang clothes on the line, and I came in and Robert was gone. And she had come downstairs and got him. The lady that lived in the house, she was a beautician, and some of her ladies were there, and she wanted to show him Robert, and so she came downstairs and got him and took him up to show him. Do you remember that? Mm-hmm. And then between he and Rayanne, I got pregnant, and he would have been born on Bob's first birthday. But I had a miscarriage, and then I got pregnant and had Rayanne. And we were so pleased to have a girl. And there was Bob only a 1.5 years old, and they played really good together. Rayanne was just beautiful. When she was born, she had dark hair, and she was always so pleasant, and a really little jewel. And then right after that, I got pregnant with Ronalyn. There was only 11 months between them. And so then we had the 3 little kids. And when Rayanne, when she was born, we got to the hospital, and it was about 20 minutes after we were there that she was born. And I always had 9 months of morning sickness. On the way to the hospital, I had to stop and vomit, and Dad paused, and we opened the car door, and it was just raining. But anyway, she was really cute, and she weighed 8 pounds and something. And Ronalyn was so close behind her. And those 3 really played good together. They didn't need to go out and find friends because they always had a house full of their own. And Ronalyn was a busy child. When I was feeding Rayanne baby food, why, I'd get so full of morning sickness, and I'd have to lay her down 2 or 3 times while I was feeding her to run. But she was just easy to take care of, and Ronaldin was just go, go, go till she climbed out of her bed. We'd put her to bed, and a minute later she'd be out. She started walking at 6 months. Rayanne was more normal. She started walking when she was a year old. But we'd wake up in the middle of the night and every light in the house would be on, and we could hear water running, and Ronald would push chairs up to the counter and get in the sink and turn on the water, and we tried putting mesh over the top of the crib. We tried doing a lot of things, but she was the busiest child in the world. And when I was trying to potty train him, Ronald would show him how and tell him what to do. But they were really good little friends. We've got lots of pictures of the three of them together, so many pictures. Like Bob would get on the tricycle and he'd put one on the back and one on the handlebars, and away they'd go. And he taught Rayanne how to walk. It was so cute. We've got pictures of that. And Ronaldin, she had coal black hair when she was born too. But anyway, so Robert was born in 1958, and Rayanne was born in 1959, and Ronaldin was born in 1960. And then we waited a little bit, and Rosemary was born in 1962, and she was so choice. But we had moved away from our house in Granger. We lived there while the three oldest were born, and then Dad went to school. He'd get up in the morning and leave at 7 o'clock. The kids weren't out of bed yet, and he'd go to school and get out at 3. And we lived so far away that he wouldn't come home for lunch. He'd just grab a sandwich, and then he'd go to work at night, and then he'd get home really late, because after he went to school, he'd go and work his other jobs. But he got his bachelor's degree, and then in 1960 he got his master's degree. And
in 64.
Was it 64?
No, 60 was my bachelor's.
Oh, 60 was your... I knew I was pregnant with Ronaldin when you got one of them. But, and then Rosemary came. We moved from Granger to a house on 21st South, across the street from the bakery. And then Rosemary was born, and she was just a little doll too, but Ralph had gone to summer camp, and I kept telling him you can't go. And he says, you don't just tell the army I don't want to go. And I said, well, you can. You're going to have a baby, and I can't have it without you. And he said, oh, yes, you can. So anyway, he left on the 14th of June, and Rosemary was born on the 18th of June. And Lily took me to the hospital, and the doctor said to her, Grandma, you can go in this waiting room. And then we had her named a couple Sundays later, and she was with, and the bishop said to her, oh, I can tell you're Ruth's mother. You look just like her. And Lily got so upset. She wasn't about to look like she was my mother. So anyway, then we had 4 little ones. And we thought, oh, now let's wait a while. But because just after Rosemary was born, we moved up to the university and lived in the used vet houses, and they were little. But it was a good time, wasn't it? Everybody was happy. They had little playgrounds for the kids, and and the women would get together a lot, and because all of our husbands were going to school. And we had a lot of good experiences. Rayanne had a little wreck on her tricycle, and we had to have her eyebrows stitched up, and Bob had his tonsils out, and Ronalyn fell on a step and cut her forehead. And they just went through all the normal things that little kids go through. And Rosemary was the baby, and she was a little tub. She was really a cutie, and the big thing I remember about Rosemary is one morning I had made waffles for breakfast, and we always took and put the syrup in a bottle with a lid on, that the handle. Anyway, when I went to put syrup on her, she was sitting in the high chair, and when I went to put syrup on her waffles, the lid came off, and all that boiling hot syrup ran down her legs. And I started crying, and she started crying, and I took off her little shoes and her little stockings, and she was just blistered on her ankles. In fact, her whole legs were blistered from that boiling hot syrup. That was sad. But one day Rosemary was leading the singing, and she always wanted him to sing, and so she'd stand in front of him and wave a pencil, and she hit Rayanne in the eye. And one day Rayanne was angry at Rosemary, and she kicked at her and missed and kicked the cupboard and broke her toe. One neat thing that I really want to go down in history, we had a great big wading pool for the kids, and then we had the slippery slide. And one day the kids took and put the end of the slide in the pool, and then they'd go climb up the steps to the top of the slide and go down. And they were squealing and laughing. They were having so much fun. And I was just by the door going in the house. And
was this in Ranger or?
No, this was after we had moved up to Cottonwood. And how did it go? Who was going up the slide first? I can't remember. But anyway, the slide started tipping over, and Bob could see it was going to hit Rayanne in the head. Slippery slide, and it was heavy metal, and so he pushed it. He said all he thought was just that it was going to hit Rayanne and hurt her, and so he pushed it, and it fell on Rayanne's leg and broke it. But I was glad it hit there and not her head. But and so she always said Bob always saved her life. And as the kids were growing up, they had broken legs and arms and little cuts and bruises, but they did really well. And they knew what emergency was at the hospitals. But they had their tonsils out when they were little. And Bob started at kindergarten while we lived in the village. But then when we moved into our Cottonwood house, we moved in on the 11th of June in 1963.
64.
No, it was 64 that Jack died.
Well, I knew I graduated in 64.
Well, I'll have to figure that one out and clarify it. But I know the day we moved into the Cottonwood house, Jack and Helen came to visit us, and Jack told us that he'd had a lump taken off, and
Remember, he didn't last more than about 6 weeks.
so that must have been 1964. Okay. But anyway, he had melanoma cancer, and from the day he told us until the day he died was 6 weeks. It was just progressing so fast, and that was a really sad time. He used to come and he was going to school to get his degree, and he had invented a little teaching device, and he'd bring it and work with Rob all the time. He started working a little bit with Rayanne, but that was just the age that they weren't learning too well. I mean, they didn't, the teaching device wasn't for younger kids, it was more for when they started school. But anyway, that was a really sad time when Jack died. It really shook me. The day before he died, Helen had to go up and check them out of their apartment in Logan, where they were going to school. And so they asked me to come out and give Jack his morphine shots. He was in so much pain. And I gave him his shots, and we talked a lot. And when we left that night, he said, "See you in the morning." And then Dick stayed overnight with him. And 5 o'clock in the morning, Dick called to tell us that he had died. That Jack had died. Anyway, at his funeral, his 6 brothers, my 6 brothers, were the pallbearers. But our family was really happy up in Cottonwood when we lived there. We lived there for 27 years. Oh no, it was more than that. I can't remember.
From 64 to 90 would be 26 or something like
27. Because the kids, they grew up. The girls were always in the state musicals, and they grew up so beautifully. Rayanne and Ronaldin both had long, sort of blonde hair, and Rosemary always had brown eyes and dark hair. She was really the cut up of the bunch, Rosemary was. But Rayanne and Ronaldin were just like twins. They were always together. They had the same room. They were all in the drill team together and in the state plays and everything together, those two. Ronaldin seemed to lead the pack, and she always would take Rayanne and they'd go do something. And there were a lot of boys, Bob's friends, that would come to the house and stay to visit the girls. And the girls went out on a lot of dates and things as they were getting big. They all wanted to start dating at 15, but their mom and dad insisted they wait till they were 16 and then go out in groups.
So they had a lot of the boyfriends come to the house.
Yes. One of their boyfriends broke our basketball hoop off the house, and but they were cute boys, most of them. The only one I didn't like was one that Rayanne had once, and I don't think she liked him either. But anyway, that was a good time. And of course, Ronalyn, she met Ralph when she was 17, and she was bound and determined they were to get married. And so on the 23rd of September in 1978, Ronalyn married Ralph, and we had a big wedding for her, and her sisters were her bridesmaids, and it all turned out really nice. I know at one time during the reception I went outside and looked, and the waiting line to go through, the line was about a block long. Maybe we should backtrack just a little bit, because anyway, when Rosemary was born, she was like 3 when I got pregnant again. Between Rosemary and Ronnie, I had 3 miscarriages, and I was far enough along that the doctors could pretty well tell what they were, and they said they were boys. But when Rosemary was 3 years old, and we lived in our Cottonwood house, and I went to the hospital, and the doctors told me it was going to be a girl, and so I took all these pretty pink things to bring her home in, and Ralph and I just got to the hospital, and they put us in just a labor room. They hadn't even taken us to the delivery room yet, and by darn, I had pain. One pain. And I started to, it was a doozy. And I started to sit up, and there was Ronnie. And when I saw that a boy, I started yelling, "It's a boy, it's a boy, it's a boy." And of course, Ralph was kind of flustered when he saw I had the baby, and there was just me and him in the room. And so, "Where's your call button? Where's your call button?" And I didn't know where it was, and so he hurried and ran out the door to find a doctor or something, and then in came him and the doctor. And when they came in, why, Ronnie was just sitting there looking around, you know. He had, the cord was wrapped around his neck, and there was 2 big knots in the cord. And that was the only pain I had. I'd been uncomfortable all day long, but we had chicken for supper. Harmon's Kentucky Fried Chicken. But anyway, Ronnie was born, and we were so delighted it was a boy. And Rob called up the next day and says, "Oh, Mom, can I talk to him?" And I said, "Honey, he's not even big enough to hear." One of the big reasons we were so happy it was a boy, because Rob had kept saying, "How come I don't have a brother? How come I want a boy? Don't you like boys?" And all this when we had the 3 girls in a row. And so when we had a boy, Bob was absolutely delighted. And he and Ralph got to name Ronnie, pick out the name. And he just not fussed, but all of Ronnie's life, Bob would teach him one thing and another: baseball, basketball, how to hit, how to throw. He taught him everything. It was just like he was his personal teacher. And he really loved Ronnie.
And Ronnie was very well coordinated and a good athlete in anything he tried to do.
And
partly attention Bob had given him.
Yes. Anyway, then Ronnie, he always played YBA basketball, and we'd take him to basketball games, and he was so good at playing, and so they'd always win. When Ronnie would walk in the gym and the little kids would see him, they'd yell, Ronnie's here, now we can win. And he had a lot of friends. There was a boy up the street from us that took a big interest in Ronnie. His name was Brad. Can't remember his last name.
He'll come.
But this Brad, he was like a teacher to all the young boys in the ward, and there was a lot of them. Oh, Hamill. His name was Brad Hamill. But he would teach all the little boys about football, basketball, everything. Ronnie loved the sports cards, and he got a great big collection, and he memorized every player, who they played for, what their RBIs were, and where they were born, and everything about them. And then he'd get on, Grandpa and Grandma Hanson had given him a recorder for Christmas one year, and he took and pretended he was the sportscaster at a game, and he made up the whole game and just recorded the whole thing. We still have those tapes. One night I had to go to a meeting, and the movie The Great Caruso was on, and I wanted to see that movie so bad, and yet I had to go to the meeting. So I went to the meeting, and when I came home, my Ronnie said he had taped it for me, and he says, but I'll tell you, I can sing as good as that old Caruso could. And so he sang a song on 2 or 3 songs on the tape, to show me how good he could sing. Ronnie was about, he was 7 years old. The doctor kept telling us that we had had too many children too fast, but we wanted one more. And it took us 7 years to get Robin. And Robin was born on April 27th, 1972. And I wanted to hurry fast and have her, because I didn't want her to be born on my birthday. Because I think if you're born on the same day in the same family, why, it just stands to reason that you have to celebrate your birthdays together all the time. And I wanted her to have a birthday of her own. And didn't we? Mm-hmm. And so, and there I went into labor on the 27th. It was early that morning. And he says, oh, you won't have her for a while. Because I just couldn't get labor going. And my water broke everything. But anyway, all day long, when they would induce labor, why, I could have it, but the minute they'd turn off the machine, I would turn off too. And so finally, the doctor said, oh, just keep it going this time. And so he was born at, 9:30 at night. And I was so glad.
Not here.
She. Robin. Robyn. We were going to name her Risa Lee. And the kids all hated that name. I was going to name Rayanne Risa Lee and Ronalyn Risa Lee. And, first I was going to name him Rosemary, and then Ralph didn't like the name of Rosemary. And so when I named Rosemary, why, he was gone. So I hurried and had her named. But then one day George, Lily's husband, said, I don't like that name Risa Lee too well. And I said, well, can you think of a name that starts with an R that's really pretty that we could put on the baby? And he said, yes, name her Robin. And boy, that stuck. And so we named her Robin, and she was a joy to the whole house. Ronnie took her to school for show and tell. He taught her to say hi, and so she'd go up and down the aisles and say hi to everybody. And she was only a year old. And he just started to be her little guardian angel. I wonder if he's your guardian angel now. Anyway, and then Bob was 18, Bob was 18, Rayanne was 17, Ronalyn was 16, Rosemary was 13. Oh, I don't know. I can't remember the exact age, but around this. And Rosemary must have been 14, and Ronnie was 11, and Robin 4. One day Ronnie came home from, well, let me start back a bit. When he went to school that morning, he kissed me goodbye, and then he ran to the door, and then he turned around and he ran back and kissed me again. And then he ran off to school. And it was on the 3rd of December in 1976. And I was sewing some clothes for Robin that day, and the kids came home from school, and Ronalyn went with her boyfriend, and Rayanne was there, and Rosemary was there. Bob was down to Scott's fixing on his car. But anyway, somebody let somebody know that Ronnie came home and grabbed a can of cookies out of the freezer and threw his coat on the couch and ran out the door with 3 of his friends. There was Zan Karen and Roger Hansen and Brian Anderson. And they ran up the street. There was a Monrock 4 or 5 blocks away that had a pond, a washing out pond. And when Bob was little, he had gone up there and played. He said it was only about 10 inches deep. And the kids, there were a lot of sand dunes and things like that up there, and the kids would go up and play, what was his name? Frankenstein's Tomb. They'd go up and play. And anyway, this was, because it was the 3rd of December, why the water was frozen on the pond. And so the story went, we found out later, they were playing hockey, the 4 boys, and somebody knocked the tuna fish can out on the ice. And so Zan ran to get it. And as long as he was running on the ice, why, it didn't break. But the minute he stopped to pick up the tuna fish can, the ice broke. And he went in. Well, when Ronnie saw this, Zan was his best friend in the whole world. And so Ronnie ran out to get Zan. And he reached down to pull his hand, take hold of his hands and pull him up. But their combined weight kept breaking the ice. And so Ronnie went in. And then the other 2 boys, I guess there was quite a yelling and everything. Roger, Brian went for help someplace, and Roger says, I've got to go get some help, Ronnie. He slid on his stomach out on the ice, and he got Ronnie almost halfway out, but the ice kept breaking again. It had been a beautiful sunny day that day, even if the ice was frozen. But Roger ran to, he said, I've got to go get some help. I can't get you out. And so he left, and he said Ronnie was halfway out when he left. And as he was running off, he turned and looked back, and Ronnie was gone. Anyway, Ronaldin and her boyfriend came and got me, and we went up there, and it was, they had come home about, I don't know, 3:30, and it was about 10 to 4 then. And there were so many people up there. Police cars and ambulances and fire engines and everything. And after I got there, me and Rayanne stood at the side of the pond and watched. And one of our friends, Verl Buxton, was what was he, honey? Sheriff. But he did search and rescues. Anyway, he got there, him and another fellow, and they put on their wetsuits and got a great big inner tube and put a lightweight ladder out on the ice. And they went out and got in the inner tube, and then they would dive in. And finally they brought Zan up and put him in one ambulance. And then he hunted and hunted, and finally they found Ronnie and brought him out. A boy up the street from us named Derek Corty, he had to identify Ronnie. Anyway, then the policeman came and told us that we could follow the ambulance up to the university hospital, and then we could identify Ronnie, because they have to be positively identified. They couldn't just go what a little neighbor boy said. So anyway, we followed him. It was just like I was in a vacuum or something. But while Rayanne and I were standing at the edge of the pond, somebody had called Dad at work or told him that Ronnie had fallen in the lake. And come to find it was a lake. It must have been, Buxton said it was like 20 feet deep. Anyway, we went up to the university hospital, and they let us go in one of these big lounge rooms, and Zan's parents came. So they were there and we were there. We were waiting for them. They said they had to clean him up and everything before they'd let us see him. And Robin was running around saying to every one of us, it's okay, don't cry. Don't cry, Heavenly Father is taking care of him. And Rayanne went into shock. And Karen's came in, and we all cried together. And then a policeman came and took Ralph and I, and we went up on the elevator, and we went in this little room, and they'd put him on a table, and I guess they'd really rinsed him off, because they said they'd found him in a lot of mud because they'd stirred up mud in the pond, fighting to try and get out. But anyway, we kissed Ronnie, and his ear was full of mud.
You know what you should do is let them see that thing you had prepared of what he had in his pocket, or tell them about it.
Okay. Well, anyway, then we went through all of that. Later we found out when I got Ronnie's clothes, I wanted to have his clothes, and I wanted to go over to the mortuary and get them. And I was telling my girlfriend, and she said, "Oh, you don't want to do that?" And I said, "Yes, I do. I have to see his clothes." And so she went over to the mortuary and got them for me. And so they sent both Zan and Ronnie's clothes. And Zan's clothes were dirty, except from about the knees and down. They were just solid mud. And then Buxton had told us that when they found Ronnie, why, his arms were out and his one hand was almost touching a pole that they had put out to see if they could find. Anyway, Ronnie had stirred up the mud so bad that he was just covered with mud every place. And I said it was in his ear, because they hadn't rinsed him off that good. But anyway, I've got a block.
Just say what he saw.
What
was in his clothes.
When I went to put Zan and Ronnie's clothes in the washer to clean them up, in Ronnie's pocket, he had a girlfriend, and on his birthday in September, his girlfriend had sent him this little heart with a chain on it for him to wear, and it said, "I love you" on the chain. And then he had his little Articles of Faith card. He had been memorizing Articles of Faith in primary. And then he had a list of his friends. And that was the things that was in his pocket.
You said Article of Faith card.
Yeah. And I've still got them. They were really muddy. Oh, that list of friends. I could hardly get it clean enough so you could read it. Because it was so muddy. But I even washed their shoes, and then I dried them and put them in a plastic bag. And, Rosemary, the week before he died, he had been outside playing and he'd gone without his coat. And he'd just gotten better. He'd had pneumonia. And when he came in the house that night, the kid said, "How come you got to stay outside?" And he said it wasn't cold, as he showed us his muscles. And I said, "I don't want you to go outside when you're sick." And I was standing at the stove cooking dinner, and I just turned around with my one hand as he went by, and only it was his hand, and popped it, it just hit on his back, on his bony back. He was a skinny thing, and my hand hit right on his back, and in a minute it was really swollen and a great big lump, and he was crying because I'd hurt me on him. And Rosemary was running around the house saying, "Child abuse, child abuse." And so Robin wrote a poem about it a few years later. And it is so, it just really fit the situation. And we've got that poem still that Robin wrote. And it's really good. And she tells how, about all this child abuse, and then she says, but Mom's hand didn't hurt after that, except when she had to stand in the line at his funeral. and shake hands with people. Ralph took, what was it, 2 weeks off, and he counseled with the girls and with me and all of us, and we thought, how is it best to go through this and not leave scars, you know. And he said, write about him. Write what you think about him. Tell how you felt about it and everything else. So all the girls wrote things about him.
Well, I just told the family, because of what I knew as a therapist, that there was going to be a lot of pain, and they needed to work through the pain for it not to leave scars. And so we talked about our home ought to be a place where they'd feel comfortable and safe to be able to express their feelings and deal with, whatever was concerning them. So we talked about being able to deal with the pain by talking about it, by writing about it, reading things about it, and if we felt like shedding tears, to feel comfortable about letting yourself cry. And it seemed as though all the kids followed those instructions except Bob, and Bob just wouldn't deal with it. It was when Bob was 25 that one night we were awakened in the middle of the night with this eerie howl. It was like a wolf was howling down in Bob's room, and he the sound was piercing. But after that, it turned out that he was going through the pain and misery of all the hurt that he carried, and by the time he got through, we could both tell. In fact, we said to each other, "We've got our son back again."
And Robin wouldn't deal with it either. She never cried a tear.
She was only 4 years old, but when we went to the funeral, she said she didn't want to go to Ronnie's party.
Well, at first she said, she went and looked at Ronnie and really hard, and then she said, "That isn't Ronnie, that's Scott." Ronnie's got a cousin named Scott that there are resemblances, you know.
But they combed his hair the same way Scott combed his hair, and it was amazing how much he looked like Scott. We could hardly believe it.
And I went and got a spray bottle.
And this was at the funeral home, and so they changed that. But the kids did various things like writing their feelings down, and that's in years later, that's what Robin wrote about that. There were lots of feelings she had about it.